Many reputable historians have documented the homosexuality and bisexuality of King James. Sir Winston Churchill, in his History of the English-Speaking People, says this about King James. Quote, "James was much addicted to his favorites, and his attention to handsome young men resulted in a noticeable loss of respect for the monarchy." End quote. The sexual relationship between King James and 5 men and women is well documented. Esm'e Stuart, 1st Duke of Lennox, King James' first love. Anne of Denmark, wife of James. Anne Murray, my mistress, and my love. Robert Carr, 1st Earl of Somerset, you're long creeping back, and withdrawing yourself from lying in my chamber. George Villiers, 1st Duke of Buckingham, sweet child and wife. King James' first documented male favourite, at the age of 13, was his father's cousin, Esm'e Stuart, 1st Duke of Lennox, a 37-years-old father of 5 children. Esm'e Stuart was a Roman Catholic, French lord. His respectful manners, handsome looks, fine clothes, and personal charm dazzled the young king. James was in such love with him, as in the open sight of the people, oftentimes he will clasp him about the neck with his arms, and kiss him. The former duke wrote to James that he gave up his family to dedicate myself entirely to you. That he prayed to die for James, to prove the faithfulness which is engraved within my heart, which will last forever. You are alone in this world, whom my heart is resolved to serve. And would to God that my breast might be split open, so that it might be seen what is engraven therein. Following Esm'e's death, James married Anne of Denmark to establish a strong Protestant alliance in Europe. Her relationship with James tended to alternate between affection and estrangement. The Queen gradually became estranged from her husband on religious issues, converting from her native Lutheranism to a discreet but still politically embarrassing Catholicism, which alienated many ministers of the Kirk. However, these marital tensions did not prevent Anne from giving birth, between 1597 and 1607, to 7 children, of whom 3 survived into adulthood. She also suffered 3 miscarriages. While being married to Anne of Denmark, between 1593 and 1595, the king was romantically linked with at least one young woman, Anne Murray, later Lady Glamis, to whom he wrote a lengthy poem addressing her as my mistress and my love. King James wrote to his male favourite, Robert Carr, I leave out of this reckoning your long creeping back, and withdrawing yourself from lying in my chamber, notwithstanding my many 100 times earnestly soliciting you to the contrary. Many love letters survived from James to George Villiers, James another sodomite lover, whom James addressed as sweet child and wife, and signed himself my dear dad and husband. George Villiers wrote to King James, I cannot now think of giving thanks for friend, wife, or child. My thoughts are only bent on having my dear dad and master's legs soon in my arms. Did King James condemn sodomy? Michael Young, in his book, King James and the History of Homosexuality, wrote, while King James did write about sodomy as a horrible crime in his Basilicon Duran, sex with subordinates was a prerogative of patriarchy, and James was the chief patriarch of the whole realm. James could have been perfectly earnest in condemning sodomy, while simultaneously engaging in what we today would call homosexual behavior, because the legal definition of sodomy was extremely narrow. It specified only one sex act between men, anal intercourse, and excluded all other genital sex acts. Furthermore, James is said to be a notorious hypocrite where swearing and drinking were concerned. He could simply have been the same where sodomy was concerned. The sodomite king defended his sodomy before the parliamentarians with such a blasphemy.
Christ had his John, and I have my George.
Because of King James' bisexuality, KJV 1611 translated the Greek word arsenokoitai, which means sodomites or homosexuals, in English into abusers of themselves with mankind. Some gibberish that no one understands. To avoid offending sodomite King James, thus KJV has made void the word of God. The word sodomite appears 5 times in the Old Testament of KJV 1611. Why have the sodomites in 1 Corinthians 6:9 and 1 Timothy 1:10 suddenly become abusers of themselves with mankind? Because 1 Corinthians 6:9 and 1 Timothy 1:10 have barred sodomites and homosexuals from Jesus' kingdom of heaven. Thus the holy word of God has condemned King James to hell. KJV translators did not have the courage to tell sodomite King James God's truth.